Hey, welcome everyone. I am excited today to welcome Kevin Kelly, the famous man who I'm unable to come up with a introduction of less than an hour for. Kevin, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to our chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your kindness. I want to talk about optimism to get us started because I think that's one of the central themes, at least for me anyway, following your work for a little bit over 20 years so far, in that you've always been able to inspire optimism, positivity in those who are listening to you. And I know right now a lot of us are really down on ourselves, down on the economy, down on even the political environment, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. And so you've always communicated that optimism is more of an asset. It's something that is we something that we need to have. It trumps pessimism. So I guess my first question for you is why would you say, why have you been telling us for decades that we should be optimistic about life?
Right, right. So you're correct. It is an asset, but it's also a choice.
Why did I write this book? A life full of meaning, achievement, and hope often seems unreachable for Western men. But now in these pages, an offer is lurking, waiting, expecting, daring. Daring you to seize it. This is an offer to give up being a victim to forever arise a victor. Visit rickwalker.com.
So there are some people who are temperamentally more optimistic than others, but everybody can become more optimistic than they were last year. You can deliberately choose to be optimistic. And that's what I've chosen to do. I've chosen to become more optimistic each year. And the reason why optimism is an asset and valuable, because it's necessary to imagine a future that we want to live in, because the future is so complicated. A good future is not going to happen accidentally. It's not going to happen inadvertently. It has to be something that we deliberately make with lots of tough choices. And in order to do that, we have to imagine it first. And we have to believe that it's possible. So that imagining that's what we want and imagining it's possible, that's optimism. And without optimism, we don't have it. And right now, today, all the cool things we have in our life, from the camera here to the screens to plumbing to your clothes, were all invented by people who were optimists in the past. They believed that these things could be, while others didn't believe that. And so basically today's present has been shaped by optimists of the past, and the future is going to be shaped by those who are optimistic. So you want to be one of those people who are creating the future. Therefore, you want to be as optimistic as you possibly can.
Yes, yes. And it seems like there's some elements of life that tie into whether or not you're going to be optimistic or not. So for instance, if I train my imagination, I train what I think on, I can direct it one way or the other rather than just letting it ruminate on the bad things that have happened. If I train my awareness on the certain things that I want to that I know that's going to be beneficial to an optimistic future, I'm going to have a better future in life. It's almost as if what you're saying is that we, some way, shape, or form, manifest our futures based off of our optimism and the work that we take on. What are you trying to speak to young men? Because I know there's a lot of young men that watch this that they really just don't know what's going to happen in the future, so they're pessimistic by default. What sorts of things do they need to take control of in their life, like their awareness, like their imagination? What are those important elements of their life that they can take charge of and maybe help encourage them to have a better, more optimistic type of perspective of life?
Yeah. So one of the things I find that helps you become more optimistic, even by choice, is to, as much as possible, to ignore the news. And I mean the news in the broadest sense of no matter what its source. You take your favorite, most reliable news source, and it is by definition going to be reporting on bad news, because bad news happens fast. And anything that's happened in the last 5 minutes is basically going to be bad news. Anything that's happened in the last days, basically bad news, because good things take a long time. They take time. They're much slower moving. And so there is a bias in all news, in the best news, to convey and be contains mostly about the bad news. And so you don't really see the good stuff. Good stuff is much harder to see. It's usually only seen kind of in retrospect when we look behind, when we take a 10-year horizon. Then you can kind of see it. So if we headlines were only given every 10 years, they'd be mostly good news. And I think so that's one thing, is to try and transcend the news. And you want to base your policies, you want to base your strategies on real data, real evidence, real things that happened, the things that are actually happening beyond the news. So it's not just anecdote, it's not just rumor. You actually want to look at the data. But when you look at the data about what's really happening, it usually requires a little bit more time to process and collect. But if you look at the data and you make your judgments based on the data and first principles, then you can be far more optimistic, because you're not being distracted by what's happened in the last 5 minutes or the last day. And so that's one thing. In a certain sense, optimists can be more realistic than even pessimists, because that's the story that you get. If you actually look at the data is that many of the most important things that we like and feel are valuable have been getting better. And things like stock market dips are just very transitory. So one of the elements of an optimistic person is they realize that setbacks are temporary, that there is a longer arc of progress. Progress is actually real, at least in the last 300 years, that it's real, and that the conditions for progress are still here. The fact that the stock market is down hasn't eradicated the conditions of our living as standard. And so you try and take a longer view. So the way that you become more optimistic is you take a longer and longer view. You look out from the past and to the future in a what we call the long now, where you have a much wider view. And that is one of the ways you become more optimistic.
So it seems like time horizons are something that we really need to pay attention to, being cognizant that the news and the negativity are short-term cycles generally, and the positivity arc of humanity, which I imagine are primarily through scientific discovery and progress, seem to be positive. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, that's true. If you do a very impartial, scholarly, scientific review of the data in the world of all kinds of things, from the environment to medicine to rights, abilities, all the things that we feel most important, generally the trends are getting better. And it doesn't mean that there aren't temporary setbacks or parts of the world where they aren't getting better, which is absolutely true. But overall, on average, we're getting better. If you have a time machine and you're going to be sent to somewhere at a random place and your own status would be randomly assigned, you do not want to go into the past. You don't want to go into the past. And so, yes, that's a foundational, I think, place to start with trying to become more optimistic, is taking a longer horizon, relying on data rather than news for your perspective, and understanding that it's an essential element in making the kind of future that we want to make.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And so I think I read that in the 1970s you got started as a photographer. You spent a while, maybe a year or so, in Asia doing photography there. What sort of led you on that discovery path early on?
It was an accident. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey, and I try to convey to my kids how parochial growing up in New Jersey was in the 1950s and 60s. I'd never eaten Chinese food in my life through high school. I'd only been to the restaurant 3 times in my whole entire life through high school. We never ate out. We never had money. You ate at home. I didn't have my own money. I'd never met even people from Asian countries, but I was interested in photography, and I had a friend who was studying Chinese in Taiwan to become a missionary, and he invited me over to visit him while he was there. And I thought, oh, photography. And so I called up National Geographic and said, I'm going to Taiwan, Japan. Do you need any pictures? And they said, that's not how it works here, but show me your stuff when you come back. And I went over, and then I had my mind blown. It was just,
Yeah.
it was so different from suburban New Jersey in the 1960s that it became my university. I was, everything was kind of open. You could see where all the things were being made. All the things we were buying were being made there. I could see them being made on the street. There was this different cuisine, different sensibilities. It was every day I was learning new things, seeing stuff I had no idea about. And then once I understood that you could travel to the next country nearby, it became like a compulsion, almost an addiction to see this other part of the world. And I became an optimist in part because I saw with my own eyes millions of people bootstrapping themselves out of their poverty into becoming some of the richest countries in the world. And I saw that with my own eyes happening. And so I understood I started to appreciate the power of the technology and the systems that we have for bringing people, because their lives without that, they look beautiful, living in a wooden house without nails, but inside it's dark and damp, and there's mosquitoes, and it's smoke filled, and there's no running water, and there's no toilet. And so they're going to move to a concrete square with air conditioning and Wi-Fi as soon as possible. And I would do the same. So I saw what technology was bringing to people in firsthand. And I had an experience of living in the past without it. And that was an instrumental part of me becoming optimistic.
Why did I write this book? A life full of meaning, achievement, and hope often seems unreachable for Western men. But now in these pages, an offer is lurking, waiting, expecting, daring you to seize it. This is an offer to give up being a victim to forever arise a victor. I want you to imagine your best possible future self and ask, what if I took a risk instead of taking a pass? What if one win could wash away all my weaknesses? What worthy enemy am I avoiding? What would I do if I knew I could never fail? Imagine it: unbeatable focus, unstoppable passion, incredible resilience, true honor, flourishing family, and more, much more. Everything you need for a life of true and deep meaning. The once impossible is now accessible in 9 steps. You see, I want to rip away the comfort now enslaving your potential. I had to discover the steps the hard way, hidden where I least wanted to look, in the abandoned genius of ancients, the hard-won wisdom of warriors, the overlooked art of the masters, and not surprisingly, within my own failures. To walk these steps is to undergo a profound evolution, as I personally experienced and now I share for the first time. Your personal journey begins now. Transformation starts with a single step.
Author Rick Walker has over 25 years' experience in strategy, investing, and global negotiations. 1 million men have benefited from his lectures and interviews with the most accomplished leaders alive. Now it's your turn. He learned from his failures and successes in his 20s and 30s as he scaled multiple businesses and nonprofits across dozens of countries simultaneously, building better coalitions and destroying dysfunctional ones. That's why, for years, the world's elite have privately sought Rick's proven steps, self-improvement tools, and life turnaround principles in their deepest struggles.
So from the ashes of unemployment I rose, not just to work again, but to build the employment of thousands. From heartbreak's hollow echo I learned not just to love again, but to lavish it without limit. From wandering lost in the wilderness, I found not just a path, but a purpose that burns eternal. So what do I want for you? What do I want to see after you read this work? I wish to see you rise, invigorated by love, to live with purpose, to strike with fire, to emerge from shadow into glorious light, to love boldly beyond mere affection, to journey toward eternal meaning, to wield courage in the face of darkness, to slay the evil you see in the world, to be forged into ferocity no storm could ever silence, and to never, never go back. So it's your turn to unlock your mind, to seize happiness, then to deserve power by taking up the responsibility that you've been avoiding. Let me be your guide so that you too can build a life of true meaning in 9 steps. Available everywhere beginning July 5th in print, ebook, and audiobook. Visit rickwalker.com. Now, were you a photographer before you left for Asia? And I guess tell me a little about your love of photography, because your book about your trips to Asia, I think that I heard something you had maybe 30,000 plus shots of your time there. Walk me through your love of photography and how that evolved.
So in high school, growing up, I was a maker. I was a kid who made things throughout my life. I made a train layout, making the buildings and mountains and all that kind of stuff, paper mache. Then I got involved in making a nature museum. I found a book at the library about how to make a nature museum, and I was making a nature museum, having collections of stuff and exhibits and stuff. And I did chemistry lab. So I was a science nerd guy, but who was also always doing art. So I maxed out on all the science and math classes in our high school system, and then I also taking all the art. And so photography, I found photography at the last year of high school, where it was this convergence of art and science, because at that time, to do photography, you had to be a chemist. You were doing the chemistry. There was a very chemical process and very technical. The cameras were all manual. You had to fix the exposures. It was a kind of a technical science thing. This is, of course, long before computers. And so for me, this was a nice convergence of art and science. And to say that I was a photographer, I before I left, I had taken a photography workshop, a residency up in upstate New York, where every day we photographed. Each had our own darkroom, and every day I photographed all day long, and then we would develop the film, make prints, and have critiques. And I was doing that for several months, and that was the extent of. I mean, I was not making a living doing it. I was doing it every day, and learning a lot. And so when the call came to travel, my ambition was to be a National Geographic photographer, but I had no experience doing that. I still felt confident enough to call up the National Geographic, and at that time, people were in the phone book and they answered the phone. So the editor, I called up the editor, the photo editor, looking at the masthead in the magazine, and so calling myself a photographer was meaning that I was passionate about it and I was doing it, but my skills were elementary at the level of a National Geographic photographer. So
about how old were you when this was happening?
I was 18.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Okay.
was 18, and um, I hadn't really even photographed in color, which is what I was going to go and bring some slide film. So I had 500 rolls of film in my backpack, which was incredibly valuable there. And I had almost no clothes. I just had film because you're shooting a film, and the problem for me as a beginner, you're still learning, was that I didn't see the images until months and months later because there's no screen. I mean, you're shooting it, and then I had to come back and I had to get a job to earn enough money to get the film developed because it was very, very expensive. And so I'm working, and then as I get money, I had sent the film to my mom and she put it in the freezer. So if it's frozen, it can be more stable. So as I'm getting money, earning it, I'm getting the film developed, which had taken months ago.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I didn't get the exposure right. And it's like, that's not, the learning cycle is not the ideal to learn because it's like months ago. So
Yeah.
that was the thing as I started to photograph, and I realized that these traditional aspects of Asia were disappearing very rapidly, and they were the most photographed. I became interested in documenting those disappearing um, traditions, ceremonies, costumes, architecture. And then, as I said, there was always another country nearby. There's Taiwan. You go to Japan. Well, Korea's right across. You renew your visas. You go to Korea. Oh, there's Philippines right next to it. Oh, we might as well Indonesia. And so I was just on the circuit of discovering these new places that were still living in the old ways. When I got to places like Nepal, Afghanistan, they in the hinterlands, they literally were medieval places. It was a time machine. I
Yeah.
literally was on a time machine in some of these towns in, say, northern Afghanistan, where they were medieval in every respect. They were lit by kerosene lamps, no electricity. There was no signs anywhere because people were illiterate. They had child slaves, child brides. They threw the garbage out. There's no toilets. It was medieval. And I was the only person with a camera within 200 miles photographing this stuff. And that was a very thin moment that didn't last very long, maybe a decade. And then it started to transform. It became easier to travel there.
Yeah.
But for a very brief moment, I had no money at all. I had a lot of time, but no money. Could get to some of those places and photograph. I could take a public bus or a Jeep, even though I had no money, and I could be there for a month and photograph in a way that was not even possible 10 years later.
Hmm. So your comment about photography and waiting months to see what the product
Right.
actually was really is intriguing because I definitely want to get into technology. That's the first methodology that I discovered you as your work acquired years and years ago. I think you probably retired before the year 2000, if memory serves. But it was a while, so it must have been the mid 90s when I first picked up on your work there. And it seems like technology is really advanced. I kind of use the camera situation as an example, in that you never found out how good your photography was, how good your settings were until months later. And
Yeah.
it seems to me that the primary benefit of technology is that it speeds up the feedback loop, and that's what makes it an advancement and not a regression.
Right.
How would you define technology, and how should we be thinking about it? Because it seems to me the word technology is I can't tell if it's standing still or if it's moving. I can't. It's just sort of this ubiquitous term here, and I know you've done a lot of thinking about that over the years.
Yeah. I use the word technium to describe the system of technologies. So,
Okay.
um, to make to make a saw, you need to have a hammer to make the blade, and to make the hammer, you need to have a saw to cut the handle. So we have all these technologies which are all codependent on each other, and that whole thing forms a system that I call the technium, which has some agency and some agenda of its own. But what we get out of this technium is we get new problems. I mean, the problems of the future are based or are solutions of the past. We're just going to keep producing more and more problems. We're not problem free, but what we get out of that is we're increasing our abilities to solve problems faster than the problems. And you think that was just kind of like a wash, but no. What we get from the technium and technologies is more and more choices, more and more options to be, more and more options to do good, more and more possible ways to make a living, more and more possible ways to be. So we're increasing the possibility space, and we try not to eliminate too many of the old ways. So if you want to live like old farmers of old, you can. The Amish are doing it not too far away in America, in the middle of, not too far from New York City. There's people living a very traditional way, and that option is still available to them, or to you for that matter. If you like opera, you can still see opera, but there's raves happening at the same time. So we have more and more possible ways of expressing ourselves, of making things, of being, of doing. And that's what technology gives us. And that's why people move to the city. So the places in Asia that I've been visiting, I still go back, and they're emptying out. A lot of these villages throughout Asia, China, even in India, other parts, they're moving. The young people are migrating to the cities in the hundreds of millions, and they're buying a one-way ticket from these beautiful villages that have organic food and beautiful architecture, and they have very strong communities and very strong families, and they're very sure about who they are, but they're buying a one-way ticket into the cities where there's grime and grit, living maybe in a slum, because they have more of a choice about what they can be. If they stay in the village, they can be one thing. They can be the farmer or the farmer's wife, maybe a blacksmith. There's just no choice. They move into the city, it's grimy and tough, but at least they have the possibility of being a mathematician or a yoga teacher or a mortgage broker or a scientist or a programmer. They have all those choices. And cities are these sort of possibility factories, and that attract people because they can decide who they want to be. And so that's what technology gives us in the end.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like a lot of the themes that you speak about, especially what you've been speaking about so far today, are more themes out of the Genesis narrative. This connection between work and creativity, this connection between purpose and future, this connection with the flocking to cities. Right, that was the Tower of Babel's. That's the curse that came up there. Is when people shed the maximum flexibility, the maximum potential of in the world of atoms to flock to the city life where they can have maximum potential in the world of sort of bits, as you and I would talk about this more intellectual type of lifestyle, relationships, better access to relationships, that sort of thing. And it seems like we've seen these fluctuations, over since Genesis anyway, these fluctuations back and forth. And so I guess my question for you is, do you see these as repeating patterns over time, these flockings and these evolutions over time, or are they something different? Are they cycles, or are they just one perpetual curve?
Yeah, there's certainly some seasonal, cyclical movements, sometimes even within generations, and generations responding to each other. I think there are some cycles. I think the progress arc is not. I think there is a long arc of through history. I think there is a general direction in the history, and it's not just repeating a cycle going around and round. So in this case, the arc from the Big Bang, from Genesis outward, is this arc of increasing possibilities and increasing options and increasing variety of things. So we go from the general to the specific.
Mm.
We have a general cell, or let's say technology. We have a camera, the first camera, and then we start to make specialized cameras. We have the high-speed camera, the underwater camera, then we have infrared camera, then we have the high-speed underwater infrared camera. We go from a general hammer to a specialized hammer. We go from and that's true in evolution as well, from a general cell to specialized cells, skeletal cells, heart cells. And so there's sort of the general direction for the movement throughout the known universe. And that's not just cyclical. And I think the movement from, we went as a species from hunter-gatherers to agriculture. That was a huge thing. That was kind of a one-way. We're not really cycling back through that. That was a one-way thing. And we're going from agriculture to the industrial. That's not really necessarily a cycle. That's a one-way movement. And we're going from this kind of industrial to this informational, digital, AI-oriented world. And that's also a one-way progress. And so the movement, this urbanization, I think is one way. We're I think 75% of the people on the planet now live in an urban area, and we're headed to like 95% really soon, where most people in the world will be living in an urban area. I define that as within 10 kilometers of a health hospital or something like that. And so that's the story. That's the longer story. And I don't think that is cyclic.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I want to pivot because you're one of the most prolific writers of the last 30 years. I want to pivot, if we could, just for a second, to talk a little bit about what you're reading, like what sort of books you believe are most transformative or have been most transformative on how you've lived and how you've written and how you've thought. And then after that, I want to get into writing. But I want to talk about your kind of your core books. What kind of books have been most formative to you?
I made a list somewhere of the books that were most influential on me, and they I think there was 5 or 6 of them. One was Walden, Henry David Thoreau, which I read in high school, who was kind of a proto-hippie in a certain sense, transcendentalist. Kind of he saw nature as kind of an echo of the divine, and at the same time he felt very strongly that you should be self-reliant, meaning you should be trying to do as much as you can. And I like the idea of building my own home and stuff, which I did later on. So he was influential. The second one was the Bible, and I think the Bible is everybody should read the Bible because it doesn't say what you think it says, no matter what you think it says. And that was reading it through several times from beginning to end was really eye-opening in many ways, because again, it wasn't what I thought it was, and it's so core to our civilization right now that you really should look at it. You really should read it. And then the third one was a little tiny book called Finite and Infinite Games by James Carse, who was actually a pastor. And this became a really big orienting thing for me, was that there were sort of two kinds of games in the world. There's finite games, which are played to win or lose, and you have fixed rules, and the game is over when somebody wins or loses, and there's a sense of fairness. You don't want to change the rules and stuff. And a lot of sports games are mostly finite games, and a lot of economic games are sometimes finite games. But then there's infinite games, and infinite games are played to keep the game going. You want to keep the game going long enough. The whole purpose of the game is to see how long you can go, to get as many people playing the game. And there are no winners or losers. And the point of it is you keep changing the rules to keep the game going. And it turns out that most of the cool things in the world that we like are infinite games. And the conclusion of the last page of this book is that there is only one infinite game, and we're all playing it. And so I use that reference a lot of thinking about. So whenever I'm confronted with a choice, it's like I'm going to choose the infinite game over the finite game. It's kind of like the non-zero sum idea.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think of the unusual life that you've had so far, really being a sort of a nomadic person, but from your age and experience, that's sort of what the vibe that I get anyway, sort of a wandering free spirit type of guy back in the 70s, so a guy that built this really, really great business and these great
recovering hippie. Yes, okay.
yeah. But it's all infused with that infinite game type of modality, because that is, after all, what business is. You can never do a business transaction if no one ever likes you. You might
you want win-win. Win-win is that's an infinite game. To have a win-win, because it's not a finite game. Someone has to lose, but you want to keep it expanding the pie. You want to make it bigger. And I as I said, I've been doing art all along my life, as I do these other things. Today I'm doing art, and I think it's very important, the creative process. And technology can be very, very creative. But one of the central things I've noticed in people who are very creative, very successful in that way, very able to be productive, is that they have absorbed or have settled on an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. And that's in part because in order to be a really great artist, you have to produce a lot of really bad stuff. There's no way around it. And Shakespeare included, and Picasso, they generate an incredible amount of mediocre and bad stuff in order to make the stuff great. So that idea, and writers are the same. You've got to write a lot of bad stuff to get to the really good, brilliant stuff. Making movies, making photography, it's all the same. Making inventions, you're going to have a lot of failures along the way. That's the only way to get to that really good stuff. And so that sense of like constantly making things, you come to realize that the well is bottomless. I can easily surrender or give up stuff because I know there's more tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll have more new ideas. I can give my ideas away because there's lots of them there. I can edit out the words and throw those first draft away because there's more there. So you kind of have to embrace an abundance view of the world, that the world is, I talk about pronoia, this idea that the world conspiring to help you, that the general drift of things is in your favor, that you're being held, and there's a conspiracy to try and make you your best. If you embrace it, if you acknowledge it, you have to surrender to that in order to benefit from that abundance.
Yes, you wrote this in your book, and I marked this. It's funny that you should say that. You said it is impossible for you to become poor by giving. It is impossible for you to become wealthy without giving.
Right.
And that was extremely impactful to me, because I'm trying to think about in my life, what are the things I have to give up in order to get. And I'm reading what you're saying, 3-4 days ago when I read this for the first time, and I'm thinking about, well, this is like one of those great truths re-articulated. I think about C.S. Lewis, who said, "Nothing that you've not given away will ever really be yours." I think about in the scripture, you don't ever reap what you don't sow. Like you've got to release it. And that's what practice is.
Right.
I think what's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah. So because there's an abundance, you can afford, so to speak, to give away as much as possible, and that allows you to be generous in things because it's abundance, because you are. I mean, that's the curious, paradoxical mystery behind all things, that the more you give, the more you get. That doesn't make any sense mathematically, but that's how the universe runs, and so you um the more you give, the more you get. And so the most selfish thing you can do is to help others. It's just so weird. And so that kind of arriving at that mindset, you know, is difficult for some people. For many backgrounds, they're growing up with very little, and there's a tendency to hold tight to what they can get. But I've seen that even in the poorest parts of the world, when people come to the understanding that the universe is biased in the direction of kindness and generosity, they will prosper, even despite their extreme poverty.
Yes, yes. And you were talking a second ago about creativity, and obviously your constraints, the constraints you pick are very important as well. You don't really want absolute creativity because it seems like it can't be maximalized without constraints. So I guess like in your personal life, in your art, in your writing, are there certain constraints that you tend to go back to that you found that work best for you?
Um, well, I don't. I sometimes will have added its constraints, but there's always constraints, even if you don't deliberately choose them. Like in the beginning, you have constraints of not having enough money to buy materials or whatever. So the lack of resources is going to be a constraint, and that's true for startups. And that's the reason why startups will succeed, is because if a problem can be solved with money, then the big companies and the billionaires are going to solve those problems. But most problems can't be solved with money. They need something else. And so that's why startups will solve them, because they don't have any money. They're forced in desperation to use ingenuity and other things to try and solve the problem. And so there's constraints just often there, just, if you're young or if you're starting out, whatever, there's those constraints. And then there's constraints of time. So artists can often add artificial constraints because they maybe get stuck or something, want a little thing, and I'll do that. Like for me, a new medium. Just yesterday, I was doing some woodcuts, linoleum cuts, for the first time in a long time, and there's a whole other set of constraints which I normally don't have, of printing and whatnot. That is liberating. It's fun. I can be creative. Um, I've been painting my pants the other day, which I'd never done before either. And there's all kinds of constraints there that I was discovering. So I think constraints are necessary, but they're also inevitable too. I mean, I guess you don't have to work at it too much, but it is fun to give yourself, because it does spur creativity and ingenuity. And if you're stuck, that's a really great thing to do, is to actually add more constraints to what you're doing.
Yes, yes. When you write, obviously you've done a number of mediums
Yeah.
of writing over the years. What is your writing process? So, for instance, if you're working on a book and you've got a day committed to a book, what is that? What is it like? What time do you start? Are you drinking caffeine?
Yeah.
Walk me through sort of the nuances of that schedule, that time.
Yeah. I'm a very slow, reluctant writer, and I hate to write. Um, and the way I normally would do a book was only after I had already written a whole bunch of stuff towards the book that maybe could be included in it. So I'm not a person who plans and sits down with a big outline and goes through it and fills it out. I'm much more of, I think they called it, there's gardeners and architects. And I'm a gardener type where I am nurturing little things and replanting stuff and moving stuff around and seeing what grows and what is interesting and watering that. And so I don't have a ritual in terms of writing. Again, I am a very reluctant writer. I don't like to do it. And for me, the first draft is just incredibly difficult. I am not a born writer. I'm a born editor. And once I get to the editing stage, then I'm very happy. I like cutting stuff out. I like just throwing stuff away. I like rewriting. I like all those other functions other than that first draft, which is really hard for me. And as an editor, I work with a lot of writers who love to write, who write thousands of words happily, and they have to write, and that's not me. I'm slow and laborious about it, and it's way too painful.
Yeah, I'm very, very, very similar to you. I like to figure out after I go through the first draft, I like
Yeah.
to figure out how can I get this sentence to be denser.
Yeah,
Get rid of words and get the
sure.
sentence, and then after that, get rid of letters because I
Yeah,
want it to be a short, dense sentence.
yeah,
Every once in a while, I want to have a crazy long sentence, but I need to have
yeah.
some density to the writing, and I think that's the creative part, right? Is you're trying to get rid of, you're trying to force those constraints. How can I get this to
Sure.
a 3 word
Right.
sentence?
That's why I liked working on the advice book, Excellent Advice for Living, because I was trying to see how I wanted to take all the stories about this and reduce it to the shortest sentence I could. Someone described the book as kind of like the Bible without the stories, just the Proverbs. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to do. There's plenty of stories behind all of them, but I'm trying to eliminate those and just give you the punchline.
That's right. Well, you've also done something more than that too, Kevin. I think you've also given us a little bit of a rhythm to it. And I don't know if you did that on purpose or not,
I
but
did.
I definitely see sort of the pentameter, the I ams and that
Right,
sort of
right.
thing. I see that on occasion, not every single one of them, but most of them seem to sort of roll off the tongue with a specific, very,
Right,
very
right.
peculiar
Yeah,
rhythm that become after page become sort of familiar, and it allows me to maybe commit more of it to memory.
yeah. Well, that's actually, I originally wrote them for myself, for as a way for me to remind myself of these things. Like one of my classic pieces of advice was if you lose track of something in your household, it's the item's there, you can't find it, you eventually find it. When you're finished with the item, don't put it back where you found it. Put it back where you first looked for it. Okay, because that really works. And so I have to kind of repeat that to myself. And
Yes.
so I was writing this down as a way to remind myself about that. Um, and you kind of commit it to memory in that sort of a sense. So that's what the original intention of writing them down was as reminders to myself. And then it was for my kids.
Yes. Yes. No, I love that. I love it. And I would envision that, whether you even if you didn't sell another copy, just having something like that to hand to your kids
Yeah,
and them to their grandkids over time would be worth all that effort. That seems just like a treasure trove.
that's exactly how I think about my books. Is they're for an audience of one. I write in order to figure out what I think, because I don't know. I don't. It's not like I have these ideas and then I'm writing them down. I don't have the ideas until I write them. I try to write them. The ideas come out of the writing. So I write to think, and that's why it's so hard for me. It's because it's not just, I'm not like channeling and writing them down or dictating it. I am actually trying to generate the ideas, and so the book has an audience of one. The book is for me, and then we'll print out extra copies if anybody else wants to read it. It's for them. And same with the photo
Yes.
book too.
Yeah. It's funny. I only wrote 3 different quotes down when I was writing my notes for our conversation. And one of the 3 quotes was a comment that you made that you just repeated. I write in order to think.
Right.
That the writing is the sort of the methodology, the medium for the
Yeah.
thinking.
Right. It's
And that
true.
makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. So are
Yeah. I
you are
don't
you a
know.
ta- are you a talker before you writer? Sorry. Are you a talker as well? Or you just
Um,
write it?
I do have ideas when I'm trying to explain things, and if I was better at it, I would immediately make a note about it and write it down. Um, I'm trying to get better at that, but yes, I do occasionally talk things out. So I often will give talks. That's my main business. My main livelihood is giving talks, mostly in China, for the future of technology and where China should go next. And um, often the kinds of things I say in a talk several times will make their way later on into something that I write. So talking is similar, where I'll be forced to have an idea in order to have a talk, a speech. Um, that'll come out of that, and then I'll have half. It'll be half the idea, and then the other half will come when I try and write it.
Why did I write this book? A life full of meaning, achievement, and hope often seems unreachable for Western men. But now in these pages, an offer is lurking, waiting, expecting, daring. Daring you to seize it. This is an offer to give up being a victim to forever arise a victor. Visit rickwalker.com. So are you a guy that you connect ideas in order to come up with new material? So for instance, are you looking for, like, you find a really great idea, a really great quote, and you find another idea and you sort of synthesize the two? Or are you looking to sort of explain something that's already resonant up here?
I'm closer to like a theoretician. I like to try to find frameworks for things. That's what I'm always looking for, is to generalize. What is the generalized pattern? What's the bigger system? What's the bigger pattern that this is fitting into? So I'm always eager to generalize, and then once I have that bigger pattern, I'll look back and say, what are the specific examples of that? So sometimes the pattern can come from something specific. You're looking at it and maybe connecting two of them, but yeah, I think that's more subconscious. But I'm always trying to say, like, talking about technology or culture is like, it's sort of like whenever there's and this is another piece of advice, whenever there's two sides of things, it's like, I know there's probably a third side. What's the third side? There's a larger pattern here. um and these days, whenever we're looking at something, it's like, well, that's happening in the US. What's the pattern in India and China? Because then that's going to tell us what the real is. This happening there as well? Because then we can generalize this and make it more something that has a frame that may be more useful. So I'm often trying to get away from the specific to the general, and then I'll come back to the specific for illustration.
Hmm. Okay. So is that just sort of a built-in template that you generally find yourself
Yeah.
going back to just for, okay.
Yeah. Like I'll ask myself, what I call listening to the technology. It's like, what does the technology want? What's recurring again and again in people's use when people use this technology? What keeps happening? An example that I use a lot is when the internet was coming along. There was a lot of concern about copyright, and it's like, well, look, this technology, it copies things perfectly, and it copies things indiscriminately, and it copies things everywhere. And to send the message across the internet, it has to be copied. So it wants to copy. So the internet wants to copy, and you're trying to protect copies. That's not going to work, because the general trend, the pattern is that what the technology wants to do is it wants to copy stuff forever and ever and ever and more. So you don't want to work against that. You can't go against the grain. Forget about copy protection. It's just you want to work the fact that the things are being copied, so you have to have something else. as a means to make money other than trying to copy protect it, because you can't. It's just the internet just wants to copy stuff. Copies are going to flow. So that's kind of an example of what I would be looking at as a larger pattern.
Yeah, and I think one of your early books too, you give it away for free online.
Yeah,
I
have. In fact, my first book, I claim, was the first book that was in copyright to be put up on the internet for free. The guy who did it later, who was working at Wired, later became well known. He invented the Apache software, which is used. He made it public domain. It's basically used throughout the entire internet, and that was his invention. And it's immaterial. He just happened to be the guy at Wired who was working there who put it up, because I wasn't capable of doing that kind of coding. But yeah, Out of Control was given away, and most of my books are I retained I retained the digital rights before the publishers knew that they were valuable. So I had the rights to do that because they didn't know. So generally, I haven't put up. Well, I have put up the advice book, but the publishers don't know it. I've tweeted the entire book, one quote every day. So so even that's sort of available for free, because you can go back and collect all the quotes if you want.
Yeah, and you always have an image with it if memory serves.
Yeah. Well,
which
these
I
days
love.
I did it twice, and so though eventually, and I blogged most of these, put them on my blog first. So even these things are available on the Wayback Machine. So I believe, in terms of this copyright stuff, that the threat to most creators is not piracy, it's obscurity.
Yes.
Okay. And so you want to make it as easy as possible for people to find and enjoy your work. And then I wrote this post called Better Than Free. So you want to have things, you want to have ways to earn money beyond the free stuff. So you can charge for immediacy. Yeah, this song will go out, eventually be free, but if you want it as soon as I produce it, you can pay for it. There's personalization. Yeah, you can get a free version, but if you want a version that is matched to the acoustics of your studio, you can pay for it. There might be authorization. In other words, you have like an NFT where you sign something, you have the signature on it, you pay for that. So there's things that you can use for business models on top of the free.
Yes. And I think there's a lot of things too that are beneficial. So for instance, the form factor of this book, I didn't measure it, but this is not a 6x9 book. This feels better.
Right.
This almost feels like one of those Bibles, one of those Proverbs filled Bibles that you would feel around. You kind of one-handed grabs. You take it to a restaurant, you take it around, and that's like the form factor tells you exactly what's going to be inside. Like like I don't need the cover to tell me. I can feel this, and I'm like, I can feel the girth of it. I can feel the weight of it. I know what this book's about, and it just sort of screams. And then you get the title, and then you get your name on it, and I'm like,
yes.
Yeah.
In actual fact, I sent the publishers a finished book, and I produced a couple of copies of. It was even smaller to begin with.
Oh wow!
And also it had my own little doodles throughout the whole thing. That they said, "Oh, those are just too homespun. We're professionals here." But anyway, so originally it was this little tiny, called Seeds for Contemplation. It was this little tiny book, which I thought, but I think economically they felt that they couldn't charge enough for the little book. I'm not sure why they did it. I thought that the smaller was even better.
Yeah, yeah. And do these little things like on these hardcovers here. It seems like a lot of publishers right now, Penguin especially, they're not releasing a paperback version. They're only releasing a
Yeah,
hardback.
I
And
know.
issue you have this sort of this wormwood or this groundwood paper
Yeah,
here that makes it feel a little bit thicker. It has a little bit lighter
yeah,
weight. It's just like
yeah,
this is the go-to methodology.
yeah, yeah. No, I kept saying, when are you gonna produce a paperback?" And they said, we're not. It's selling well in the hardcover, and we're just gonna keep it." And so, all right. The reason why I was asking is I had an additional 60 uh, proverbs, 60 things that I added to the foreign editions that I was going to add in the paperback edition. Um, but the other sides are going to be a paperback in English anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, I think also, a lot of the publishers they want to stick to that 29.99
yeah, yeah, yeah,
hardback methodology, and
right.
this is a little bit different because of the form factor. You can get that price down, and it's going to compete against a lot of the paperbacks as
Yep.
well, which that seems to
Yeah,
make
yeah,
a lot of sense as well.
yeah. I mean, publishing books is a tough business these days because the center of gravity of the culture has moved to YouTube and TikTok. My children and their friends are not reading books. They're spending their as I am. I'm spending huge amounts of my time watching YouTubes, and that's the center of the culture is moving images and three-dimensional spaces. And so um, I'm not anticipating publishing many more books on that are book first. So I will produce books as a secondary thing. It's like doing a transcript of a podcast and you're making it into a book, something like that, where it's not originally a book, because that's not where the culture's attention is. It's on the screen right here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think what you said about 3 minutes ago about this idea of obscurity and giving away your work for free, you can either pursue being rich in this economic environment for as a writer and have a very low probability of that and become obscure. Like that's the downside is you're
Yeah,
obscure, you're ignored. Or maybe you could give yourself away and you could at least get a glimmer of attention from the masses and be somebody in the long run.
yeah.
Like there's two trade-offs there.
Yeah. At the very beginning of the internet, when people were doubting, it seems crazy, but this was a real thing. People were doubting whether or not the internet would ever be profitable. All right. I mean, they were saying that the people are not. No one will ever buy a car on the internet or whatever. It's like, um, and there was a whole bunch of things. And I made a couple of posts. I think Fast Company might have ran the article showing that the amount of attention that where attention goes, money will follow. And so it was very clear that the attention was moving on to the internet. And I was saying, even though there's no money there will be money, because money will follow wherever the attention is being given. So back to your idea, yeah, you want to give it away, you want to get attention. That is the scarcity. If you can get people's attention today, then if you have attention and can maintain the attention, the money will follow.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
doubt in my mind about that.
Hey, have you followed this book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I just realized very recently that they've just been giving the book away
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
online. I
As
didn't
a
realize
PDF.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A PDF. That's where I saw it. I didn't know that. I didn't even know it was a book. I mean, it was a PDF book in my mind. Yeah, yeah. So that's the way of things now, which is, and that was the argument that the Grateful Dead made when they had this. They were allowing people to record their conference and then swap them around. The Deadheads had this whole thing, and they were saying piracy is advertising. It's just advertising for our concerts, which are in real life. And so that was way ahead. That was in the '90s. They understood that, and I'm the same way. I mean, a lot of my books in China are pirated, but I don't care because my income is in giving the talks, and the more piracy in some senses, the better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it seems it's hard to get an idea to go viral than if you're going to try to charge for it. Like it seems like you've got to at some point just you got to allow it to run free, and the virality seems to be one of the very handful of methods by which you can get I guess, become a man of relevance.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who is a TikTok star. He has millions, if not billions. He makes weird art. Have you ever seen the flaming Cheetos sarcophagus?
No.
All right. Well, he does these sort of ridiculously complicated, arduous tasks. He suspended a package of flaming Cheetos inside this huge concrete sarcophagus, which he moved and buried somewhere like a time machine. And he makes a little video of it, and then he'll sell some aspect of the art to his galleries, I guess. Well, I mean, so he's still like, he has incredible viral coverage, but it's still a job to kind of turn that into a relationship with a customer. So it doesn't, it's not automatic. So yes, the money will follow from the attention, but it's not automatic. You've got to actually be creative in making that work.
There was something I was wanting to ask you a second ago when we were talking about writing in order to think.
Uh-huh.
I had just finished. Do you know who David Perell is?
Oh yeah,
He has.
I've been on
Yeah.
his
Okay.
podcast. Visited him in Austin.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I was in his final cohort. I think cohort
Oh yeah,
13, and actually,
the writing class. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And Eric Jorgensen, the guy that wrote the almanac with Dave Sains in it, was in the same thing, and that's what made me think of him. Now David goes back, and he seems to have a pretty firm belief that speech to text, like those apps that dictate your speech, write down what you're speaking, that for a lot of us is the way forward, kind of out of it, because we think and we can speak a lot faster than what we can type. Uh, do you see that? I mean, you have a lot more interaction, a lot more people than I
Yeah.
do. What do you sort of see in the culture? Do you think we're more of a speaking culture or writing culture? Like, how does that all get processed in your brain?
In the old days, they used to have two kinds of corporations. There was ones that had voicemail and ones that had email. The voicemail ones sort of went away. I think Audible will come back as a very viable thing as AI becomes more commonplace. What I'm seeing among my most techie friends is uh, people talking to chat GPTs, and that is, and I'm doing more and more of that myself. And because you can have a real conversation and it's pretty fluid. So I do think that there is going to be return to more oral things. In China, they're having these little audible memos, audible messages are a really big thing. They're because typing Chinese is still not as fast as English, and so people will send audible clips, whatever they're called, to each other a lot. So I do think it'll play a bigger role. I'm not sure how far it will go. People who code, the coders still believe that keyboards are superior to anything else. So I think we might. There'll be a lot more audible, but it may not be universal.
Do you believe that people 500 years from now will still be able to read?
Oh yes, yes. And it was interesting is that I've been forecasting this idea that you would read movies and watch books, that there would be a little bit of convergence to the moving image and text, and we're seeing that already with. I don't know about you, but I have captions on for everything I watch on video and TV, and YouTube. I'm reading a lot of what I'm watching. and there's more and more of marginal material being added to like YouTube things where they'll have text, different things, lyrics. In the games, they've got text. So text is still an incredibly powerful communication thing that I don't see it going away.
Okay. The editor that I had on my forthcoming book turned me on to something called Speechify. It's an app that'll read your text.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, I write in Google Docs. It'll do it in any document, but you can have it play it back to you. And the number of errors in editing and the sort of that rhythmic approach to the text that I've caught and be able to perfect because I'm able to hear it orally, not just read it,
Right.
has been substantial, and it's really been a game changer. Do you believe that orality is sort of the final, I guess, the final future state for human communication, or do you think it's going to be something different? I think we'll be trapped sort of in the oral textual type of communication, or think it'll advance beyond something?
I'm not sure what we mean by final, but I think I would put it this way. I think we haven't done yet innovating in what we can do with orality.
Okay.
So it is. I think if I was to imagine the ideal interface in 500 years, orality
Yes.
would be a large part of it, but so would gestures, so would facial expressions, so would maybe other symbols that we are interacting with. So I don't. I mean, it's slow. And we also have brain-mind interface things coming up, which I thought were hundreds of years away, but they're only 25 years away. You know, the stuff Neuralink and the other things where I went down to see the monkeys, and they're controlling computers with their brains. So we want a non-invasive version of it. I don't think most people want to be jacked in, but we can have a cap. We can have a cap, and you might be doing a lot of that with just thinking. And so some people would say that's more of an end game, 500 years, than even speaking. And so, so anyway, so I think orality, we haven't done innovating it, and there's lots that we could do. I'm not sure that it's the end of it. I think it's just another element in it. You know, one of the things about orality is that it's very hard to see what the options are. I mean, this is the issue with Alexa. It's like, what are my choices? I don't know. And you want to hear them read out? No. That's boring. So you have it display and you have it shown, and that's a much faster way to scan through something. So there might be ways to be able to discover with audio better than we have right now, that haven't been invented yet.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting choices on the title for Eunice's book. Excellent advice for living, wisdom I wish I had known earlier. I want to pick out a couple of these words, just really ask you about your intentionality with these. So, for instance, advice. You use the word advice. You know, we could have used input, we could have used counsel or feedback. I think feedback is the word that Ryan Holiday used in his interview with you. Why advice, and what sort of resonance does this word have? Because it seems to be a clearer, crisper word.
Well, the actual original name of the book was Pretty Good Advice, but that had already been taken by someone that I knew, so I didn't even feel comfortable stealing it because it's still in print. Advice, I don't know. I never had an alternative to advice. That was sort of the one word that was never under negotiation. It could have had like proverbs, aphorisms, but none of them seem to um, convey um, as much as advice did. So I'm maybe I would confess I didn't think about that much.
Okay, but it was always there, and I think that's
Yeah.
interesting. It was sort of a
Even on my blog posts where I was originally publishing, I was using advice, if I'm not mistaken. I think uh, I think I was just using advice because it seemed like that was what it was.
yeah. Okay. And I guess my other question is about the word wisdom.
Ah,
Right? It's not there. It's not mere throwaway tips and facts and sayings.
yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
wisdom.
Wisdom is more deliberate. That was something intentional. I, I've always been attracted to wisdom and wise. My friends, I choose my friends more on how much wisdom they have than how much money or success they have. Even as a young person, I liked wisdom. I liked the wise, and um, so wisdom seemed to me something that I found valuable, something that I cared about. And if I could offer wisdom, maybe I'm, you know, immodestly considering myself as wisdom, but that was sort of where I where I respected and admired um, people who were wise, who had wisdom, more than how rich they were, more than how successful they were. Was I consider my friends to be some of the wisest people I know.
What are the things that you look when you identify whether or not someone's wise?
It turns out, like I think maybe we were talking about this earlier. I don't remember, but it's having one of the elements is having a long vision, a long term perspective. That's one of the things I think for me is encapsulated by wisdom is you have a elevated view, and part of it is a time view as well as kind of a cosmic view, I guess. And so for me, that's one thing is that they have a longer view and a bigger view, and yeah, it's that elevation away from the day to day, and yeah, and more of a cosmic, the relative importance of things. I guess.
Yeah. I think that I find the definition of wisdom tied to future the same way that you do, Kevin. Um, I say that the wisest mind is the one that looks into the most distant future for the most valued reward, which can only be purchased with the currency of the present. The wisest man looks into the farthest in the future for the most valuable reward that can only be purchased with the currency of the present. That we have to not only see that and kind of aim at that, but we've got to be willing to sort of sacrifice what we could have right now for that future goal. And I think there's a lot of really smart people out there that never make a sacrifice.
Hmm. I agree. Yeah, I
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think that.
I like your definition. It's really good.
Thank you, thank you. The ability for I it seems like you've really pivoted over the last 15 years or so from being someone talking about the future to to someone that's really helped us understand ourselves a lot better as more of a mentor role. Do you feel that change just you because I'm looking at this from a third party, but it seems like you've really made that shift very very well through this and your other work.
Yeah, I think that may be true. Although I don't have any actual mentees, um, I don't think of myself as a teacher. That's not part of a picture of who I am, which is strange because I make my living giving talks, which is kind of a teaching, and I write books like of advice. But I'm just I'm not a, what's the word I want? I just never thought of myself as a teacher, and I haven't really kind of stepped into that role. For whatever reason, it's not how I think of myself, but I have always been interested in the culture. So Wired itself, the magazine, was not really about the technology. It was about the culture of the technology. And I've always had an interest in that kind of cultural aspect of it. And so maybe I'm writing more about paying more attention to the cultural aspects of the changes coming in, and maybe that makes it a little bit more accessible and related to wisdom. But yeah, I don't have, and maybe in the years that I have remaining, maybe I will try teaching formally. It's never really appealed to me. It seems like a lot of work is is what it does. I think I'm too lazy to be a teacher.
Well, as one of the handful of people that I've ever met that have actually written a piece of wisdom literature,
Yeah, I
I
know.
think
I know.
I think it may be creeping up on you.
Yeah. I mean, I have to maybe face the facts. Yeah, but I mean, for whatever reason, I haven't really stepped into that. But um, I've done one day talks with other teachers who've come in, and I'm just sort of awed by the amount of work a really good teacher does. What's involved in really doing it well, and maybe I've been intimidated by that. I have very high regard for teachers, um, and particularly good ones. Um, and so maybe I'll give it a try.
Yes, yes. Well, two final questions. The first thing I want to ask you is sort of core elements of your schedule or sort of core disciplines. Like, are there things that you find yourself doing every day when you're home that you would sort of seem be like sort of a behavior or a discipline?
I go for a walk every day. I'm a huge walker. In fact, I started the first walking magazine in America. I am a natural walker. I'm my happiest walking, and as I said, just did the last 100 kilometers of the El Camino de Santiago just last week in Spain. I just walked the last 100 kilometers with some friends, and um, I just love walking. So I walk every day, and when people come to visit, um, I often will piggyback with that saying, "Come to the studio, and then we'll take a walk." So I go walking with them. I like to have a walking conversation. It's really good. I think you think differently when you're moving. So I'd love to meet people to have a walk and so that's something I do every day. I have different. I've done different things where I'll do art every day. Some art. Sometimes it's more specific where I will literally do it every day, and others ones where I'll kind of do it most days. Um, so then I try to read some paper, something every day, something technical if I can.
Mm-hmm.
Or these days, more and more of the presentations, like technical stuff, are on YouTube, which is one of the reasons why I watch a lot of YouTube. So there will be like a technical paper on YouTube. So either read or watch every day. Let's see what else. I have a piece of C's candy chocolate every day.
That's a New Jersey boy type of thing to have every day.
Right. C's candy. Well, it's in California. But so but beyond that, I don't have a lot of other daily rituals. Every day is very different. This week is very different. I'm doing podcasts for the week, so there'll be very, very different rhythms. I'll have, I travel a lot, so I'll be in China for a week or two and have that thing. Even when I'm home, I'll have a week of like working on an art project or working on an article where I'm spending most of my time. So I enjoy that kind of not having too many rituals or routines, I should say, routines. Um, so generally, I'm pretty flexible in terms of uh, having days be different day to day.
Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. So I want to wrap up our time really the same way that we started, talking about attention, because you have so many different formats of content that you have out there. And I
Yeah.
call it content. That's sort of a diminutive term, but
No, it's fair. We've got a podcast. We have 5 newsletters. We've got a website. I've got my blog. Got some books. We have
yeah,
a YouTube channel as well.
yeah, and you've got all these ideas out there, and we haven't gotten to 1,000 fans, which I think is probably one of the most revolutionary types of things. You have all these ideas out there in the marketplace, and as you look for, you look toward the future, and you're trying to figure out, like, what am I going to be remembered by? Because that's what I think about all the time. Like, what am I people remembering me by? Do you think it's going to be the books, or do you think it's going to be the blogs or the videos? Like, what are you kind of thinking is sort of going to be the number one thing people think about Kevin Kelly,
Yeah.
100 or 200 years from now?
Well, first of all, I don't think they're going to think about me at all in 200 years. And that's the brute fact that we're all going to be forgotten within, a generation or two. But I think, much to my surprise, I think probably the 1,000 True Fans will probably be what most people will remember, which was kind of, odd in the sense that it was just something I wrote very quickly one day, and that was it. It was like a blog post, and there it is. I rewrote it for Tim, but
is it Tools of Titans, wasn't it?
Yeah. He wanted to run it. I said, well, it really needs to be rewritten because that was a really just tossed off one day, and so that's how it goes. It's like maybe I'll do something else that will be remembered more or make a bigger impact. I don't know, but I don't really think about that too much, because I just assume that outside of my family, it's just we're gone. We're erased very, very quickly. It's very, very few people who ever have any kind of presence beyond 100 years, let alone a couple hundred years. So I'm kind of preparing for that. I'm not expecting it to be remembered.
Okay. Well, that has brought us full circle to optimism.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So be optimistic about the future, but be realistic about what the probabilities of your fame might be.
Yeah. Influence can extend even when the people don't know your name, and that may even be the best way to be influential. So it might be that some of the ideas I had retain their influence and work on, even if my name's on it, even if I don't get credit. And so I probably care more about that than I do getting credit.
Yeah.
And my work at Wired, my work in Optimism and stuff. And so if I can have some effect, that could have some cascading consequences down the line, and changing people's idea about the role of optimism. I would be very delighted if that spread, even if my name was never attached to it.
You're like the pastor who wrote the book on the infinite game, that then
Right.
Simon Sinek
Right.
makes
Right.
popular.
Right. Very few people remember cars, which is fine. I'm sure with he's probably happy too. So yeah, I'm much more in that camp.
Okay, great. So we're going to link to the book down below. We're going to link to Twitter,
Thank you.
link to YouTube. Where's the best place for folks to connect you? Like, is there a preferred platform that you have, Kevin?
Well, it's my initials, kk.org is the website where most of the stuff goes through. On the socials, I'm Kevin2, the number 2 Kelly, Kevin2 Kelly. And I have a newsletter, a free newsletter that we send out every Sunday morning called Recommendo. So it's recommendo with 1m.com. And it's a one-pager, really brief little 6 recommendations of cool stuff that we recommend. And we're very proud of that. I've done it for 8 years or something, maybe more. And so that's the funnest thing that we do today. Recommendo.
Yes, love it. Well, Kevin, thanks so much for joining me. We appreciate it. And everyone, thanks so much for joining us. And be sure to follow Kevin, buy the book, and we'll see you next time.
Rick, I really had a great time. Thank you for your fantastic questions. I love your spirit. I appreciate it. And thank you for taking time with me.
I appreciate your encouragement. You've encouraged me for years. And so it's just great being able to connect with you. Why did I write this book? A life full of meaning, achievement, and hope often seems unreachable for Western men. But now in these pages, an offer is lurking, waiting, expecting, daring you to seize it. This is an offer to give up being a victim to forever arise a victor. Visit rickwalker.com.